I don't get it. I don't get it. These arrows, man. So I'm thinking how Bethesda did this is they took all the weapons, they're like, here's all the kinds of weapons we put in the game. Let's research them, figure out how they looked, how they were used. Maybe we can modify, make them fantasy design. They did the research, they got historical advisors and everything, and they're like, alright, so this is how that was used? Okay, cool. We're going to design to do the complete opposite, so I can't do that. The shaft is fine. The fletching is fine. I mean, as I said, with every other arrow almost, it extends past the actual knocking point, which would make it slower to knock. This one seems a bit extreme because the others extended half an inch, maybe an inch past. This one seems to extend almost like a 2.5, 3 inches past. So it'd make it just unstable. Like the majority of the fletching isn't actually attached to the shaft, so I don't know how durable it would be. The arrowhead is pathetic, to say the least. It's pincer shaped again, and thin. Even the pincers on it are quite thin. So I mean, and they're not very long. See, I mean, they're maybe an inch, inch and a half. 2 inches. I mean, even call it 2 inches. That's all you're gonna pierce. You're gonna get a couple of, I don't know, a couple of 3 or 4 millimeter diameter holes that go 2 inches deep. It's not an effective killing weapon. But anyway, the quiver itself is fine. I don't really see an issue with it. It's pretty plain quiver. Looks to be made of leather. It's got a taper towards the bottom, which I personally like aesthetically and for function. Moving on to the glass arrow, and I'm about to have another heart attack. What the hell is going on with these arrows? What is this? What is this? In this picture, the shaft itself looks quite thin, but I don't think it's that thin. I think it's this picture. The fletching seems quite short. Actually, the fletching looks to be the exact same shape as the elven arrows fletching, just these actually looks to be feathers. Not a whole lot of issue there. My biggest issue is that thing attached to the other end of the arrow. I don't know what to call that. It doesn't deserve to be called a broadhead. That fantasy thing. Well, where do I start? It's the wrong shape, I guess, like to put it simply. It's sort of pincer shaped again. It's got a gap in the center that just defeats the purpose. That's just a point that's going to get caught on clothing, armor, muscles, tissue, whatever going in. So it's just going to snag and stop once it gets that deep. So the fact that the blade of the arrowhead travels further down is not really all that useful because it's going to stop maybe 2 inches in. The arrowhead seems, it's in its of itself really heavy, like as a whole, it unnecessarily large and heavy. As I mentioned earlier in my the previous video, that weight isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can make a arrow hit harder. It's going to lose some range, but here it doesn't really do much because the extra weight is part of the arrowhead, or the blade of the arrowhead coming back, and you don't need it because the arrow's never going to penetrate that deep. Not to mention how it's attached. It seems like it's just got maybe 4 little metal spindles that kind of come out of the shaft and point outwards like this that hold it on. So it's just got those 4 little spots holding it, so it doesn't seem like it'd be greatly durable, especially for that heavy of a broadhead or thing. Moving on to the quiver, they have messed that one up again. Well, seems like they either do the quiver well or the arrow well or decent until they get to the glass, and they're like, I'm ignoring the fact that it's called the glass arrow. I'm going to assume it's not actually made of glass. But yeah. The quiver, on the right side of the quiver, well, looking at the picture of the right side, is just too tall. You wouldn't be able to actually, from the looks of it, you wouldn't actually be able to grab the shaft because the fletching extends past the knocking point, and the top of the quiver is like stops like flush with that knocking point, so only the fletching, so you'd have to grab the feathers or be forced to reach around at an awkward angle and pull it out. Speaking of drawing arrow, it's slanted, so it's lower on the left side, but again, if you're right-handed, that doesn't work because you're going to want to draw with your right hand. You can't draw with your left hand if you're holding your bow. Like, oh, hang on, let me switch, and no, okay, awkwardly, okay, now I can knock it, and no, you don't want to do that. So it seems like all these quivers have like a slant to them, which will look, well, some of them look neat. This one looks stupid, but some of them look neat, but they're slanted the wrong way. They really need to slant the other way so that it makes the arrow more accessible to the user. On to the iron arrow. This is one of the first arrows you get in the game, and I like this one, I do. Maybe it's its simplicity, but the shaft is fine, no problems there. The fletching is also fine, looks a little rough, but no problem with it. The knocking point is actually behind the fletching, so it makes it nice and easy. The arrowhead is simple, just a double-edged, finely pointed piece of metal. It does its job, and it's simple, and I like that. I also really like the quiver. It seems like leather stitched with more leather cord, tapers from the top to the bottom. Even though it's similar to the Forsworn quiver, I like this one better just because stitching up the side really adds to the aesthetics of it, and I like that. On to the Orcish arrow. This is a really dark picture. The shaft is fine. Can't really tell if it's made of wood or metal. I'm not really sure. The fletching is fine. Again, it extends a little bit past the knocking point, but not a huge deal. Just more of a preference. The arrow the arrowhead is quite wide and thick. So in this picture, you can just see how wide it is, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not going to be as effective as a thinner broadhead would be, or a bond kind of piercing armor or something. But as far as shooting unarmored targets, I think if you have a powerful enough bow, it's not really going to hurt anything. Those roll long barbs are going to keep the arrow in the body. Not going to be able to pull that out. You can't really tell in this picture, but it's also quite thick, which would just make a bigger hole. But it also decreases the ability to penetrate. So it's sort of a trade-off. But if you have a powerful enough bow, it's not really an issue. Onto the quiver. I don't understand the shape of this quiver. I really don't. Although it's done one thing that no other quiver has done in this game so far, and that is that it slants to the right, so right-handed people can use it. Given the fact that the majority of people are right-handed, do you think it'd be done that way? Given the fact that your character is right-handed, do you think it would be shaped this way? None of the others are. I'm not really sure what this red little cloth thing hooked to the metal ring in the center is, but it's unnecessary, but it doesn't really harm anything. It doesn't really add a whole lot of weight. This whole loop thing, I don't particularly understand. At the top, it's to look cool, I guess, although it looks stupid. It's got these two little leather loops on the right side of it, and I'm not really sure what that's for. Honestly, that looks like belt loops, like you'd run a belt through it if you wanted to hold it in the middle of your back. However, if that were the case, it'd be facing out to your left to be for a right-handed user. So that's weird. It's finally slanted to the right, so a right-handed user could properly draw an arrow from it on his back. But then if it's got these little belt loops, it looks like it could be on the lower back. But if you put it there, then it would be for a left-handed user. I don't know, adaptability. I don't know, versatility. it's really thin, so you can stack arrows, but I've seen quivers where they're thin, you just one arrow side by side all the way through. It makes it really easy to grab the arrow, and it usually keeps them in place, they're not sliding around. So as far as that concept of it, that's not a problem. Kind of confused by the little U thing, or the overall curve of it. So like, I don't understand why they're curving. I mean, I can understand the slant, make it easier to draw your arrows, but the actually curving doesn't seem to really have much of a point to me. Now this one's a little bit different. It's the rifling spear. I'm only concluding in this video because you can shoot it from your bow. As a spear, for the size of the person using it, I think it's completely fine, but this is an arrow video. As an arrow, I think the broadhead's a little big, but again, not a problem. It's shaped fine. You just need a little bit more powerful bow to, if you want to keep the same range, but it hit pretty hard. There's no fletching, but as I said in part 1, that's not a big deal. An arrow will still fly pretty straight without fletching. Fletching just helps stabilize it and helps counteract some of the weight of the arrowhead. The biggest thing about this and being able to use it with a bow is it doesn't actually have a knock on the back. You need a notch or something that you can put on your string. But in the game it's extremely inaccurate, so why not? No quiver for it. That I don't think there's a quiver. There looks to be a little leather strap around it, but I suppose that could be for just keep them together. For carry, I don't know how well that would work. Alright, and finally, last but not least, the steel arrow. Shaft is fine. I don't see a problem with it. The fletching, it looks to be of leather, is honestly what it looks like, but I don't know, because leather I feel like soft enough would be too thick. It add unnecessary weight to the arrow, and on the wrong end. You don't want your arrow to fly through the air and then at the end of its flight start to fall like this because the back's heavier. But it probably wouldn't outweigh the arrowhead, but I'm not entirely sure. Or it could be stiff leather, in which case, as I mentioned in part 1, you can't have stiff fletching. It's got to be able to lay down across over the shelf of your bow. The knocking point is actually flush with the back of the arrows, which isn't... you can do it. I mean, it just... I don't know, a little weird. I wouldn't want it. The arrowhead actually I really like. It's got some barbs on it, and it's actually 3-sided or 4-sided. It's 4-sided. So it's a thin version of a modern hunting broadhead. No problem with that. I don't see a problem with the arrow at all. The quiver is the same problem most of the quivers in this game have, is that they have they're curved the wrong way. So it's slanted again, more for a left-handed user. It's got metal bands around it, and I can't really tell how thick it is here. It looks to be quite thick, which could add some unnecessary weight, but if it's just add some rigidity, I don't see a problem with that. So that's the end of part 2. Something I was thinking about through the video, but I decided to save to the end, is that I mentioned all these quivers having the curve the wrong way, and it'd be difficult to... I'm thinking if it was straight up and down. Your quiver's going to sit at an angle, so it's not going to be as bad as I made it out to be during both part 1 and part 2, but it would still hinder the drawing of an arrow quite a bit. It wouldn't make it quite as difficult as I made it sound, or as I mentioned, but it would still be much more difficult than necessary, and you don't want to impede your ability to draw an arrow in combat. That's just ridiculous. So thanks for watching. I hope you guys like it. Let me know what you think. If you've got any other suggestions for videos, leave it in the comments or something, and make sure to read those. I read all comments. As of right now, fortunately, there are few enough that I can read them all. But yeah, just leave in comments if you have a suggestion, or if you have any comments. Maybe I forgot some arrows, or whatever. So again, thanks for watching.